I'm Olivia Wildhagen-Piercy, an outreach assistant at the St. Joseph Public Library, and this is the May installment of the DIY Why Don't You program, usually held at the downtown library. And today we're going to learn how to make some felties. As you can see, they're just very small, cute, and they're entirely made out of wool, just using a little needle to put them into shape. Now,
okay, let's get started.
Sounds good. Other basic supplies here. This is our felting mat. It protects the table from the needle and the needle from the table. The table because it can be scratched by the sharp point on the needle, and the needle because, as you can see here, it is very thin and kind of brittle because it's not only got this narrow triangular tip to it, but it's got these barbs all along it that help it catch the wool. And you'll be using this needle to poke and tangle everything together into your finished piece. And if you're working on a larger project, something I prefer to have is this holder right here. Just a bit more ergonomic, easier to hold for long periods of time, and just, saves you all that trouble with your hands. After that, we've got our felting wool that is just good old roving, loose, all apart, nice and clean. You can't really use stuff like fabric or yarn for this unless you have a very specific purpose with the yarn, which we won't be using today, but you can find that later if you want. But just the basic colors we'll need. And we have our needle and thread to add some facial details later on. Just completely average this stuff. Beyond that, we just have a pair of scissors to help keep things moving, and a set of finger guards, which are actually completely optional. Some people prefer to use them because it's a bit of a safety guard in case your needle slips. It hits this nice thick leather instead of your fragile hand meat, but frankly, I feel like it makes me a lot clumsier actually to be working with these things, so I prefer to just try and watch and be careful. Doesn't always work, but it's more comfortable 90% of the time.
So the needle and thread, that's just regular sewing needle and sewing thread.
Yep, you can use some embroidery floss if you like, but just anything that's a needle and thread will work. A bit of a longer and thicker one is useful too, just because it's a bit sturdier to push through the felt body later on.
Okay.
Alright. And then from there we just basically have to start felting the thing. Now, first step is we're going to take the color of our basic body and pick out just a good amount of wool to start with. This material is very puffy, easily condensed, and weighs almost nothing, so there's not much in the way of exact measurement outside of just proportion. And our first step is to just start ripping it up like this, because when you start out, everything is facing in the same direction, all of these little fibers. And if you tangle them all up to start with into a ball, then it'll help speed up the process by getting everything to start knotting together before a needle even gets in play. So just keep working that for a bit. Really rip it up, don't just separate it. And once you have it all in just kind of a puff ball like this, you can start getting in there with the needle. And when you're poking it, 3 very important things to remember. You always want your fingers on the sides or top of the piece where you can see them. You always want to poke straight down too. This will keep your needle from breaking because you aren't flexing it at an angle as you take it in or out of the piece, and it will make it easier to avoid hitting your fingers at all too. And the third thing is to just keep turning it, because if you keep poking in the same spot, then it will start flattening on that side, which you can want sometimes, but right now we're just trying to make a nice round squishy body shape for our cat.
So are you gently poking it, or are you putting some actual force in it right now?
It doesn't require much force. Once you're later on and it's all firmly together, you'll have to put a bit more muscle into it. But right now it's basically just almost letting the gravity of the needle pull itself down. But just keep turning and moving it and picking it up, because that'll keep it from felting itself to your surface. Now you see, you keep an eye on it. I let my finger get in there. I almost poked myself.
Oh, what if you don't have one of those mats?
Oh, a lot of stuff do when you're just looking for something. A chunk of memory foam, even a clean dish sponge, you can use if you're careful not to just jam your needle all the way through it. As for actually getting these materials, you can look at basically any online retailer. I got my beginner kit off Amazon for about $30, and it came with a ton of wool in all different colors, a nice felting mat, and a few needles to start out with. But you can pick them up at any general craft store, really. If you're local, I know Michael's has some, so you can look into their curb pickup or online services if you want to. And if you're looking for something that has written instructions, you can also look either at a craft store or online to find individual projects that are pre-packaged with pre-measured wool in every color you'll need, with nice diagrams and instructions inside.
I think I have an example of one of those that we can show at the end too.
Mm-hmm. So just keep working it, and it'll take a few minutes to put this together. So feel free to put on an audiobook or a podcast, anything that doesn't require your eyes on it. Audiobooks I would heavily recommend. You can get those through the library's website. What's the database on that?
If you go to sjpl.lib.mo.us and look under e-content and databases, you will be able to find Missouri Libraries to Go, and that is where you can get all kinds of audiobooks.
Excellent. But just keep working it and keeping it in a nice round shape, and eventually this will firm up a bit further. Let's get back with you when it's closer to that point. Alright.
So that represents about 3 minutes, 5 minutes of working with the needle.
Just about. As you can see, it's much more closely formed into a solid shape, but it is still very, very squishy.
Mm-hmm.
This is just kind of the point where we can start actually shaping what we want out of it. Now, for our cat, we're going for a kind of blunt little pill-shaped body, which just means kind of squishing it a bit into the shape you want and working it almost as a cylinder here. Just keep on rolling it to keep these sides nice and level with each other and give it a longer form. And you can go on and shape the ends some, but you want to focus the majority of your work along this horizontal here. Still just keep on turning it. And you're going to keep on working it until it's a good bit firmer and smaller.
And what did you say about the ends?
You can go on and shape them. Just give it a poke on each side on the edge you choose to poke down on. Will push it in a bit.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So you want to keep it. You can work them to keep them nice and round at the ends there, but the majority of your work tightening up the form will be along this middle here.
How would you rate this on as far as like stress relief? Is it frustrating when you first start, or is it pretty relaxing?
I would call it pretty relaxing. I mean, it's therapeutic stabbing and you get something cute out of it at the end. What more could you want?
Fair enough. All right, I'm gonna let you form that a bit more and we'll be back.
Sounds good.
Okay, so you've been working this for at least 5 minutes now.
Yep. And as you can see, it's a lot smaller. It's firmed up a lot more into a solid shape, not so easy to squish. The thing is, it's a bit smaller than I would like it to be, so I'm going to take a bit more of my wool just in the main body's color. Gonna rough it up just like before, and I'm going to go on and just wrap it around this like a sheet and felt it on. Now it'll go on faster since it's already attached to this main body here, it's all firmed up, but this will add a bit more bulk to it to make it a nice, like, bit of a larger canvas to work on when it comes to the decoration stage.
Gotcha. Well, it's nice to know that there's an easy fix for that if it's not turning out quite the way you expected.
It really is. Felt is a very forgiving material. If you have too little, you can add more on. If you have too much, you can just chop it off and try again, basically. But just keep working it into that firmer core you've already built up. And you can see
you can barely even tell that you added it now.
Mm-hmm. Very easy to incorporate more onto an existing piece. And working it up in layers like this actually makes it much faster to build the bases of larger projects.
Yeah, you mentioned that some people like to actually wrap stuff and put it inside before they start putting the wool on the outside just to make it go faster.
Yeah, a cheaper solution to, say you're making a piece about this big around, would be to take a ball of polystyrene stuffing and just wrapping it up in thread really tight, so you have a core to already start felting on when you're ready to go. And that'll save it, since cotton is a bit more expensive than the polystyrene.
And this is actual wool that you're working with?
Yep. I don't know what artificial materials work well, but it has to be soft and easy to tangle together and take dyes well. So wool is just a very solid pick.
So it has to have that kind of natural texture to it too, where it's going to tangle up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
See, as you can see, it's starting to get pretty firm.
Is that closer to the size you wanted?
Oh yeah. This will be a bit easier to work with when it comes to the decoration stage. And now that it's almost done, you can still give it a squish. We're going to pick one side that we want to be the bottom of the piece. I feel like starting here would be good, and we're just going to hold it still and keep poking it flat. Now you want one that's mostly firmed up so you know what your final shape is going to be, but you still want it soft enough for it to take this amount of deformation, basically.
In case anyone wonders what the clacking was in the background, that's our old dog just walking through.
Yep.
Trying to decide whether she wants to settle down or not.
Just has to have her 4 p.m. mosey around the house. And now we're going to get this side nice and flat. We're actually going to go a bit further and make it slightly concave, just so that it's easier to finish off some detailing later on. And then we've got this, and we'll just shape it up a bit more to make sure we have a nice firm surface to work on and get the shape just how we want it. But we are very close to having a finished body here. And I think we're about done. Now, as you can see, it's just pretty symmetrical, kind of a little bread loaf shape.
Mm-hmm.
And it's nice and firm. You're never going to get one of these just rock hard, but you want something that you can add onto without immediately squashing it all in where you do add stuff.
Gotcha.
So we're finally at the point of adding some decoration. Now I want to make a little gray and white tabby cat. So what I'm going to do is take some gray wool for the ears. And I'll show you a nice trick here, is you take about twice the amount of wool you think you'll need for something like an ear or a paw, and you just rip it up and then do your best to just divide it evenly down the middle, and that'll help make it so that you can make symmetrical ears, and it's a lot easier than trying to rip off two pieces of the same size from the whole piece. Now, and this might be a bit hard to see, just because of the surface of my mat, so I'm turning it over. But what you want to do is start felting this into a flat sheet and keep flipping it over pretty often, just because if you don't, it'll get basically integrated to this and you'll have a new slightly thicker felting mat. But just keep lifting and turning it, and you can fold the edges in to give them a nice crisp edge to the ear. And remember to leave one side of it, the base, loose. You'll use this to incorporate it onto the main body later on. And you can poke along the sides like this to point the ears and flatten the edges a bit more. But just keep working it until you have a nice, firm, flat piece that doesn't have a ton trailing off the back of it when you lift it up from the mat. And we've got a first one that looks pretty nice to me.
So you were really just kind of shaping it into that triangle as you were stabbing the felt together.
Yep.
Okay.
A lot of it is just feeling it in your hands and just eyeballing it, basically. Like I said, there's not really an efficient way to measure it besides just in relation to what you've already grabbed. Alright, and as you can see, I've got these two that are basically symmetrical. And up next, we just have a bit of decoration. So we'll be taking just a tiny puff of little pink wool and kind of roll it up into a ball, give it a couple rips, and we're just going to start felting it into the center of one of the ears. Now you want to poke very, very lightly with thin pieces like this, because if you push too hard, then it'll shove the pink through the back of the ear and leave it with the color bleeding through. So what you want to do is just slowly shape it, leave a nice crisp edge around the color for the division between the inner and outer ear, and just be very, very gentle. Whisper, don't scare the wool.
Speaking of fibers, I know that I have heard of people using like their dogs shedding hair for felting.
I mean, it would work. It would probably depend on the dog, but it has to do with having these nice, long, thin fibers that will tangle together. So, German Shepherd, probably not so much. Poodle, maybe. And then we're just going to repeat on the other ear.
Okay.
Alrighty, now we've got our finished ears, and I will say one bit of advice if you do end up pushing the pink through the back of the ear, is you can take just another tiny puff of gray and add it onto the back, being even more careful and gentle than you were last time. And that'll cover the pink up right away. And now we have the tail. For this one, you'll just want to take a slightly larger piece of wool. We want to be able to felt this one up nice and sturdy since it'll be thin when it's done. Rip it up. And we're just going to aim to make a nice little rectangle with this. Keep turning it. And we just want to get this into one piece basically before we take our next step, and we will roll it. That's a nice easy way to make a tail right off the bat, and you can even fold it over if it's a bit too long. And we just keep poking this to make it nice and firm. Just keep turning it to make sure it has a nice round shape while you're at it. Working with felt is really great because you can keep it to these nice simple shapes and just have a cute little chibi decoration to have on your house, or during a holiday just decorate a shelf with it or whatever you like. But people can do some really wild stuff, like I've seen fully realistic cats, like life-size.
I really like that you can do kind of personalized gifts for people too.
You can. Favorite character, favorite pet, favorite child.
That would be a neat trick.
Now we still have this kind of squishy, but a lot more firmly in one piece. What we're going to do is curve it. A bit hard to see, but just hold it.
I'm sorry, that was a technical difficulty. You fold it in a C?
Yep, just leave it in a nice little curve here, and you can start trying to poke it while holding it in that shape, and that'll give it a nice curve to your cat's tail when it's finished and attached to the body. And you just want to go until this is nice and firm as the body, if not firmer. And there we go, this should be fine to attach.
Aww.
Now we can take our cat, right here, pick which end we want to be the butt.
The tush. The rear end of the kitty.
The behind us.
The caboose.
Alright, just pick a nice spot and start poking around. Now we leave one end loose to everything we attach to the main body because that gives us something we can drive in and anchor it with. So we're just going to go around the base, every angle, and attach it like this. Now you want to poke firmly. We're trying to drive that right deep in there. And we're going to use our finger to just hold it steady while we straighten the angle. Yeah, that looks about attached to me.
Mm-hmm.
Now we take our ears. Just going to spread this wool out a bit more to make it even easier to attach. And now we just start poking in. Now what I do is I always start with one end and then the other of the ears to just kind of anchor where I want it to begin and end. And then I can start driving in around it all along. But you just want to keep felting and pushing it down until the pink is flush with the head and they are firmly attached.
Oh, look how cute they are. That almost looks like a kitty.
I mean, I would hope. Now I'm just going to take some gray wool, and now we won't be poking this very firmly because what you do when you poke it firmly is you can still deform the cat in. So I'm just going to lightly poke it like I was when I was coloring the ears, and I'm going to add a bit of a gray hood onto our cat.
Right now it looks a bit like a rockabilly kitty.
I mean, you can add some rockabilly hair if you wanted to. I'm not going to on this one. As you can see, I'm just kind of working back and forth with these light, quick pokes. And there we go, it's just fully incorporated in. And now I am going to add another stripe across its back. Feel free to make whatever pattern you want, of course. Like, even grab a few colors and make yourself a calico. Grab some pink and green and make yourself a space cat. Creativity is everything. Make a dog.
Have you seen any truly strange things that people have made from felting?
I have.
What was the weirdest one you can think of?
Probably someone that made these really big kind of installations on the wall that were of kind of freaky looking faces or maybe masks of some sort. I don't know, you can really go into a lot of detail when you work on a larger scale. This is just like less than an hour's worth of work. If someone really gets in there and puts the effort in, they can do some impressive stuff. But we're just making a little kitty today. And now it's time to start adding the finishing details. So what we do is we just take our thread on our nice sewing needle and push it up through the base of the cat. Might take you a few tries to get it to come out where you want, but...
Is there already a knot in that thread, or do you
now
not worry about it?
A knot really isn't necessary for this, since we'll be sealing off both the ends and they'll be looped around quite a few times.
Oh, I see. Well, that's good. That's even easier.
And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some stitches right across here to make little sleeping eyes.
Yeah. Do you have to be careful about how tight you pull those stitches?
You do have to be careful not to just yank them too tight, since there's still a bit of squish, but it's not something you have to be super delicate with. But just try to make some nice even lines. There we go. And then I'm just going to go in through this edge of the eye one more time and come out right here to start on the mouth. I'm trying to decide what shape I want. I think I will cut across level here, come up again and back out through here. And you just kind of have to zigzag back and forth to make these stitches how you want them. Like, I want to strengthen up that side of the mouth a bit more, so I'll go in there, back out there, and this is a bit easier if you have thicker wool, thread like embroidery floss, just because that will give you a nice line you don't have to go back over multiple times.
Oh, well, look at that.
Yep.
I honestly didn't know where you were going with that shape.
And just a little
Now I see.
W for a cat face. And I'm just going to turn it over. Here, take our scissors and cut the excess off the bottom here. Now,
sorry. For my right-handed scissors.
Now all we do is take a bit more of the white wool and attach it over the bottom to cover where the thread is, which is why we let the surface a bit concave earlier on. And ta-da! The only thing left is to add a little kitty cat nose, which is just itself a very small puff of pink wool that you go on and press into its face with your needle. And ta-da! We have our little kitty cat.
Let me see his face. That is really cute.
Yeah, and it's very easy to, if you want to make this something like a keychain, to just take another small piece of wool, take a loop to a keychain, pass it through, and just felt it down on either side to anchor it in there.
Very cool.
Yep. And this took an hour, maybe less, to finish up here. So not a time-consuming craft if you just want to make something small and cute. Alrighty, well, I hope you enjoyed just an introduction to felting. If you're interested, then there's all kinds of more complex and skilled things you can add into it, like wire armatures. I just used some pipe cleaners that gave this little fawn posable legs. Doesn't stand so well with one thumbs up, but it does make it easier to make a long, firm piece like this that you can even pose if it does have a bit more of a stable base. Like I mentioned earlier, you can turn something into a keychain. Like this is my favorite little Animal Crossing character, Sherb.
It's really cute.
It is. Or you can do something like filling the base with beads so that it can sit on the edges of tables without falling over.
And that one has posable arms too, right?
It does. Not entirely stable. You do have to take your time to balance them. Beyond that, there's all kinds of just cute little things. Like you can add in plastic button eyes that are easy to find online. I've only seen them online. I suppose you can find them elsewhere though. Just they're kind of on little pegs you can shove into their face.
Now, the penguin doesn't have those, does it? Or does it?
No, it does. I really missed that. Or you can just work with the wool itself to make some really fun designs.
Oh yeah, I see that you just used the wool for the pig eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Pumpkin pig and cinnamon bun pig.
Yeah. And this one's even got a little curly vine for its butt.
Nice. Its tail. This is a library program.
Okay. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I'll look forward to seeing you when the library is able to open its doors.
In their locations.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be glad to have everybody back in our libraries someday soon. We hope you enjoyed this installment of DIY Why Don't You? Thank you, Olivia, for doing this.
You're welcome. I enjoyed, hopefully teaching some people how to do a fun craft.
Good deal.